Okay, so these are our group members: Brandon Perez, Mark Livesey, myself, Myra Avila, and Rebecca Flores. First, we will have Mark Livesey introducing the Culture Iceberg Icebreaker. Mark.
All right. Right here I have my Cultural Iceberg Icebreaker. And visibly, you can only see about 20% of this iceberg. The rest is water, for example. The rest is water. And I compared it to my cultural person. This is my cultural person. Visibly, you can only see about 20% of the person's culture, just like you can only see 20% of an iceberg. The rest is underwater, and you got to find that out for themselves. And now I want everybody to describe one word they would think about culture.
So now that we have a better idea of where the iceberg comes from, we're going to really talk about culture. So would you like to go first?
And I'm going to start off with race. How I feel about race, or how race compares to culture, in my words. Both my parents were from different races. My mom's Hispanic and my dad's white. Both of them came together, and basically that's how I think about race or whatever.
Okay, so let me see. Let's make it bigger. So the first word that came to my mind when I thought about culture was background. Now, I chose background because typically when I think about culture, I think about many things. One, where a person has been, how they became the way that they are today, and how it really has shaped how they interact with other people. And what I think the perfect word that describes that is background. I personally come from a really kind of diverse family. My mom is part white, but also part Spanish, and then my dad is Mexican. So very diverse, going to different family events, and from that I really learned and gained a good perspective about different backgrounds. For example, my mother has somewhat of a different background, and you can see that in her personality and the way she handles things in a white Caucasian kind of aspect, but you also can kind of see her Spanish aspect come out when she cooks or talks sometimes. And when it comes to my dad, who's very Mexican, he's very, you can see his background through the way he talks, the way he speaks, the kind of language he speaks, and so on. And what would you think?
Okay, so I chose religion, and the reason I chose religion is because I am a Catholic, and I met my husband years ago, and he's a Christian. So now that we have kids together, we have to kind of see if we want to either baptize our children. So we're in the middle of that. We need to really decide on what religion we want to stick with. So that's why I chose religion.
All right, so for me, when I think about culture, I think about tradition. Now why? This is because I am originally from Mexico. I did come in when I was 15 years old. I know all the traditions that we used to have in Mexico that we really have here, such as, of course, but a lot of people do celebrate, let's say, for example, Dia de los Muertos. However, they celebrate by maybe just buying bread, eating it, and thinking that it's just El Dia de los Muertos, just because it is. However, in Mexico, Really Dia de los Muertos means that you go to the cemetery and you go and do some praise for all of your family, the family that's been deceased. Also, during Christmas, we have something that's called posadas, meaning that you go, from house to house, kind of looking for shelter, just like kind of like Jesus Christ did whenever, Jesus was actually born. So that's just how I think culture is because of the tradition. It's a little bit different. When I came in here, there was a lot of different traditions, such as Thanksgiving, just that we just had it lately. So now I'm trying to adapt to that since it's a different culture.
Okay. So next, I will be introducing what is culture. What is culture? Culture is a very important element that will shape the world's process, environment, and the relationship towards other employees. It is the influence on how we all perceive the world and everything in it. Culture can also involve shared values and practices that are considered a norm within a group of people.
Before we get too into what the culture is really about, for an example, I would like to discuss about how an iceberg really helps in a workplace when you want to learn about other people's cultures. For example, a good icebreaker you could do in a training to learn about culture would be to introduce yourselves. 1, state your name, what company you're from, and what position you have at that company, and what you're looking to get out of a training program that discusses different cultures. Now, we're going to do a little example about how that would help. So, for example, I work for Mitsubishi, and I am a buyer for Mitsubishi. So I would introduce myself as, in front of the training group, as Rebecca Flores. I come from the Mitsubishi company, and I am a buyer for that company. And what I do is buy the parts for the automotives at the best prices that will be the best quality for the best price. And now other people, for example, will introduce their positions as well.
My name is Myra Avila, and I will be introducing myself as the HR at Mitsubishi. My job there is to hire and fire, and also do payroll and make sure that everyone is getting paid the way they should be getting paid.
I'm Mark Lucy, and I am a part of basically managing the whole business, making sure we got all the books right as far as the accounting and stuff like that, making sure on the floor that all our employees are doing what they're supposed to be doing to make the business successful.
Okay, so I'm Brandon Perez. I am the professional engineer that takes care of every foundation of the vehicle to make sure that the quality is always the same for Mitsubishi, such as, it's always been. I always make sure that all the cars that go out there are safe and also are good in performance. Of course, we always take them on test drive. We do a lot of test drives with different kind of vehicles and different models to make sure that all of the vehicles that we provide are actually how much they are. So all 4 of us pretty much, have a major role in this company, and we try to make it as good as possible as it's always been.
So by hearing all of us give an example about where we're from, that enables all of us to gain a perspective about the other people. And it would also help make connections for networking, help us know how to approach a certain person and know more about where they come from. And that definitely helps in a training course for cross-cultural communications and whatnot. And it is definitely a good icebreaker to have and to keep in mind for future use, so that we all see where all of us are coming from and help to know how to approach them and know more about them. And so now further on into our slideshow about cross-cultural communication.
Okay, why is this important? People that do not share the same culture will peer on to another culture and vice versa. The practices made by a group of people is learned by social interaction within their group, which distinguishes them from other cultures. Now, we'll have Rebecca Flores presenting discrimination.
So discrimination, the basic term for discrimination is that it is an unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of different people or things, and is kind of the understanding of the differences between right and wrong. Now, the law itself forbids discrimination, and especially when it comes to any aspect of a human being, especially an employee. This could hinder them to be fired, it could hinder them to be even hired, and it could hinder their pay rates. Now, there are many types of discrimination. One is the big one, race discrimination. Now, this has been going on for several years back, and when we had slaves, when Martin Luther King was around, we have always just had to deal with discrimination and still continue to work on it. The second one, major one, is age discrimination. Now, it is illegal to harass an employee because of their age. Now, that is not a more common one, but it does happen, and it is wrong to discriminate a person just because of their age. Now, another big discrimination type is gender discrimination. Now, a lot of women feel offended in a workplace because of their race. Because of their gender. For example, their gender could help hinder their pay rates, and it could hinder how they got paid compared to males discrimination. And another big one is cultural discrimination. A big aspect of that is religion, and that becomes an aspect throughout the entire kind of discrimination process.
Okay. Finally, we'll have Brandon Bettis presenting how to resolve conflict and managers' policies and consequences.
So conflict is pretty much everywhere. We know that conflict has been going on in every single industry, in the business. This is when two people do not share the same idea, and this is where conflict comes from. But of course, we have some steps to avoid conflict, okay, and how to make sure that conflict doesn't really happen in our business, since it will lower productivity, and of course, it's going to lower our statistics. So with that being said, we will have to look at the root cause of the conflict. We'll have to see what the areas of improvement of an employee is. See if an employee has issues at home. Maybe that's why he started a conflict with another employee. You never know what's going on in everybody's life. With this being said, you gotta make sure that you listen to what you're saying and who you're talking to as well. Just as well as maybe a manager speaking with an employee. They should not feel like they're really their boss, but more like they're their leader. Their leader will be because they're gonna follow their steps, and they're gonna try to make sure that they get there where they wanna be at. Also, to avoid conflict, it will be best to make sure that we're always following policies. Managers should be following policies, as well as making sure that the company is going into a more productivity state.
Okay. So this was our 15-minute group presentation. Again, thank you, Brandon Bettis, Mark Levitsky, Rebecca Flores, and myself, Myra Avila.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.